Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Live and to some French Grand Prix reaction. How was that? Did you all enjoy that? Absolute thriller, wasn't it? Cracking race. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's going to be sarcastic today. A bit less sweary than last time out in Canada, but it is going to be a little bit sarcastic today. We're joined by Chamber very, very soon. Of course, Stuart, to discuss the action from that Grand Prix. But we will start, as we always do, good afternoon everybody, by having a look at the race results. Lewis Hamilton won the French Grand Prix. I know, pick yourself up off the floor. Valtteri Bottas in second place. Another Mercedes 1-2. That is 8 out of 8 for Mercedes in terms of victory. And I believe, is that 7 out of 8? No, 6 out of 8 for 1-2 finishes. Pretty dominant. Charles Leclerc, third place for Ferrari. Top 3 did not change. Max Verstappen, fourth for Red Bull. Sebastian Vettel, I guess you could say, recovered to 5th from 7th on the grid, but you would have expected better. No disrespect, of course, to Max Verstappen. Carlos Sainz, fabulous weekend. That's the first time I said fabulous on one of these streams, but I'm going to anyway for McLaren. Apart from obviously Lando Norris's troubles today, more on that later. But 6th place for Sainz, 7th for Daniel Ricciardo. That is provisional. All the stuff you see on screen, the stats, the results, it is all provisional. The Aussie is under investigation for leaving the track. Let's not even go there. He left the track, came back unsafely, and gained a position off track. So it's one of those again. Kimi Raikkonen, 8th place for Alfa Romeo, 9th for Nico Hülkenberg, and 10th in the end for Lando Norris, who had issues. Pierre Gasly, shocker of a weekend. I can't. If you're a Gasly fan, I'm sorry, I can't dress it up any nicer. He needs to pull his finger out, or he needs to be out of that team because it's a joke. He should not be 11th in that Red Bull. Appalling from him this weekend. Sergio Perez, 12th place for Racing Point, 13th for Stroll, which I think he'll be relatively happy with, funnily enough, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Kvyat in 14th, Albon 15th for Toro Rosso, Giovinazzi down to 16th. Didn't work brilliantly for him today. Kevin Magnussen, 17th, in a miserable weekend for Haas. Kubica, 18th for Williams, 19th for George Russell. And Roman Grosjean retired from his home Grand Prix. And given the weekend he had, perfectly honestly, I don't think he'll be overly disappointed with retiring. It was not a good one. Not a good one for poor Roman. But of course, I'm not alone on this stream. Good afternoon, Stuart. That was fantastic, wasn't it? Action, drama, wheel-to-wheel racing, lots of overtaking. Just absolutely brilliant. But enough about the F2. How did you find the F1?
I didn't know where to look. The back of my eyelids or the TV. It was a really hard decision to make.
It wasn't the best, was it? I think it's the only way I can put that. I know a few people will have enjoyed it, but I thought it was absolutely... Well, I spent most of the race looking at Twitter, and I think that kind of tells you all you need to know, really. I've even got a drink. I've even got a beer. That's your fault, Stuart, for messaging me that. I've even got a beer to get through this stream. So we'll start with Mercedes, obviously. Dominant. And what else can you say? I mean, Charles Leclerc made it a little bit interesting towards the end, didn't he, with Valtteri Bottas? But Lewis Hamilton, 18 seconds up the road from his teammate. It wasn't even close in the end. I think Sky called it a masterclass, and that's probably the only way to put it.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't fault him, can you? And you can't really fault Mercedes, but it really is not helping the overall show. I actually, because I'm quite an optimistic and I'm not going to say naive, but definitely optimistic person, I kind of went into this thinking, okay, well, we've had tracks before where the first race has been a bit duff, but after that it's sort of picked up a bit, like Baku has sort of been 50-50. But you got to worry, haven't you, about this track? And although, you know, we can go into details about this later, I still stand by that it's not necessarily the tracks. Once you change some of the cars and some of the rules, you could probably go to lots and lots of different tracks and not have these kind of problems. But yeah, it was nothing really sort of happened, did it? And the stuff that did happen, we didn't see because the director wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, more on that later. Not impressed with those final few laps from the director, but, you know, obviously torn with all the action that was going on. It was difficult to keep up with it all. But Lewis Hamilton, only real threat, I guess, to his race was his tyres towards the end. Got some nasty blisters on, but with the gap he had, he could just nurse those home, so I don't think there was any drama. There was a moment in the race where he complained that something had broken on his seat, and that got everyone going, oh, hang on a minute, and then he went and set the fastest lap a lap later. So whatever it was, there was clearly nothing majorly wrong. I say dominant, masterclass. There's not really a lot I can say on him. I think what I will say, and I don't like saying this after race 8, and I certainly don't like saying it 3 minutes into a live stream, but this title's in the bag for him, isn't it? Number 6, I think it's pretty much done and dusted. And as for the constructors, as you'll see in a minute on screen, just like that, look at that. They've got that one done as well. 8 races in, Stuart, and barring an absolute implosion from Mercedes, it's all done.
Yeah, someone tweeted at me, and I need to double check that. Well, we can do it on the screen now, I guess. Mercedes have more points than Ferrari plus Red Bull, which is always good news. 8 races in, isn't it? Yeah, it is kind of done, isn't it? And Valtteri Bottas, who looked like he was looking to try something, has not sort of kept the momentum, has he? And now Lewis has won 4 in a row. We're only a third of the we're just over a third of the way in, but still, I think we know where the momentum is right now, and we just got to hope that race on race things show their head to keep things interesting. But we are already kind of at that point where we're treading water a little bit, and we kind of know how it's all going to go, and we start looking to 2020, and which is a shame. And I don't necessarily think we should be looking that way, because we still could have plenty of exciting races to come. But we're going to Austria next, which is always pretty exciting. But yeah, we do have to start worrying that race on race this year has been a bit duff.
Yeah, it feels to me like, after Singapore last year when Hamilton had basically wrapped it up then, it feels like that. But I mean, so we still got some good races. Brazil was a really good race. Abu Dhabi wasn't actually all that bad, as I recall, for Abu Dhabi. Mexico was a good race, so we will still get some good races, particularly in that midfield. So there's still plenty of reasons to keep watching. But in terms of the championship, I think it's realistically done. Do you think Bottas can take the fight to Hamilton? Because I hate this Bottas 2.0 thing. Because the truth is, he came in with a point to prove, but also, as history, if you like, has shown us, he has always performed better in those first 5-6 races of the season and then tails off. So I personally don't think he can, but I don't know if you feel differently. Try and make it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about this Bottas 2.0 thing, because as I sort of argued a bit last year, I think he's been he's been as strong as a driver this year as he probably was last year. He just, he had so much potential in the first third of the season last year, but luck completely took away all the advantage he had. He had several opportunities to win in these same amount of opening races. He had at least 3 or 4 times he could easily have won, and it just didn't quite come together for him. Whereas this time he has managed to get a couple of wins and quite a lot of second places, but he's not, he's already quite a number of points behind, because he's only won 2 races and Hamilton's won 6. We've done 8. Yeah. So he could, I mean, I would love, he can, there are still tracks where he is strong, where he showed himself to be good. I mean, Austria, for one, is the next race up, and he's won that race quite convincingly before, even if he sort of did jump the start once. So
let's not get into that one again.
Yeah, and I think looking at the points difference, Hamilton doesn't need to take risks to protect, and Mercedes as well don't need to take risks to protect that point advantage. But if Valtteri Bottas finds a little something extra, if Ferrari, because one of the stories about this weekend was that Ferrari figured out that their aero data they'd been collecting was all wrong. So what they were expecting the car to do was very different from what the car was doing, and they figured out why. They figured out what the errors in that sort of their understanding were. So they were able to, they think, turn a corner and develop the car from here. And if they can do that, then they probably won't win the championship, but we might have a few more races when they're battling for the win, they're battling for pole. So plenty still to come, up in the air about what Bottas can do. But if Hamilton has one bad race and Bottas wins it, then that points gap tightens up significantly. And then if that gives Bottas the mental impetus to just keep pushing, then maybe. But as we know, second half of the season, Hamilton is something to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and it's 2 weeks ago, Hamilton was saying he didn't even think he was at his best yet, which is quite ominous, I think is the word I'm going to go with. And I will just say, before anybody puts it in chat, some would argue that Hamilton's only won 5 races this year. But we're not opening that can of worms. Not that one quite this week. But I think it's pretty much done. Vettel, I just missed it there on the screen. I think he's 70 odd points behind now as well. So I don't think the title's on for Ferrari. I think the only hope, if you like, for the neutral that wants to see a good title fight is if Bottas can really deliver form. But I think he's going to need at least one DNF from Lewis to do it. But we shall see. Honestly, I know there'll be Hamilton fans going, you never give him any credit, but there's just nothing to say about that performance. He was dominant. It was a masterclass, as I've said 3 times now. There's just no other way to put it. And not anything happened apart from his seat broke or something broke on his seat and his tyres got some blisters and he brought it home 18 seconds clear of his teammate. So the only thing that did get interesting towards the end though, Stuart, at the front was Charles Leclerc nearly got Bottas. Some talk that apparently Bottas just couldn't switch his tyres on after the brief virtual safety car. Oh, weren't you praying for a safety car when you saw that bollard? A proper full course safety car.
Yeah, and the race directors are not historically against over-egging a safety car to liven up a dull race. But yeah, we had about 10 seconds of virtual safety car, and which actually did nothing to the race, but really screwed my predictions where I predicted there'd be no safety cars in my fantasy GP score. So thanks a lot for that, Bollard. Yeah, I mean, yeah, another lap. Leclerc could have had him, but what we really want to see is that sort of last 2 laps between Leclerc and Bottas spread over a whole race. That's how the race should, or at least the last stint or the last half a stint. So we sort of see a kind of drama unfolding. And actually, quite a few of the races this year where the sort of first 2/3 of the race has been a little bit off the boil, they have often sort of ramped up to something at the end when all the tyres are in different places and people are sort of struggling in different ways, and then the gaps start closing up all down the field, and suddenly you get all these little fights appearing to the line, which is sort of what we got the last minute between Leclerc and Bottas and some other drivers down the grid, which I'm sure we'll cover later. But that's the kind of thing we want to sort of be able to spot coming 30 laps away, even if it takes till the last 3 or 4 laps for Leclerc to get there. If we knew it was game on 30 laps ago, we might have a talking point. But it just felt like nothing was, like they were just sort of all fixed in their positions, and that there was no point following what was going to happen.
Yeah, we will talk about the last lap, but anybody that thinks that exciting last lap saved the race is a bit deluded. I want to see a 53-lap race, not a 52-lap procession and one bit of drama at the end. But yeah, we'll talk about that because I think Daniel Ricciardo is still under investigation. But Charles Leclerc did absolutely everything I expected him to do today. I said it in yesterday's qualifying report. For me, I felt like going into this race, although Hamilton was talking about having a good race with him, I felt like Leclerc's job was to go out, cement that 3rd place, and get the result in for Ferrari. That's exactly what he did. He was, 15.9 up the road from Max Verstappen in the end, right on the back of Bottas. Might have been a bit further back without the virtual safety car, but I think he did. Again, there's not a lot to say on Leclerc. He did what I expected him to do, to be honest, Stuart. I don't know if you thought he might be able to give more in the race. I know Ferrari do tend to be better on race pace, but a solid podium. What he needs to do, really.
Yeah, that was kind of what we expected and probably the best we could hope for from him. Although, it's that, the first lap is when we sort of see potential for something to get mixed up if you got up into 2nd place on lap 1 or even 1st place just by luck of that long run down to the first corner, which we do see a lot of position changes. We saw it further down the field in F1 and we saw it in both the F2 races. There's a lot of scrabbling for positions into that first chicane. If he got himself sort of positioned up a little bit higher, then we know track position is really important. He could have got himself a little bit higher. Messed with the Mercedes a little bit, who knows? But yeah, once those first laps were over and Leclerc was just sort of sitting there in 3rd place, never quite keep it. He was there. The first stint especially, we were like, well, Leclerc's not that far behind the Mercedes. It's still potentially game on depending on what happens, or if a safety car comes out. As we've kind of got used to saying now, we're like, it's well primed for a safety car. But yeah, I think third's kind of what we expect, isn't it? It's kind of amazingly, after all these years and after the season testing and the preview to this 2019 season, Mercedes are more dominant and unstoppable than ever, which is still blowing me away.
I don't tend to react to chat too much at this stage, but I will say, for those in chat that are bashing millennials, I'm a millennial, so do you want to shut up? It's as simple as that. Not everyone's the same. Don't tie everyone with the... what's the saying? Don't tie everyone with the same brush. Simple as that. It's such a cop-out from some people. That was not a thrilling race. That was not an exciting race. It was not, as I often say, the worst thing I've ever seen, and I didn't think it was boring. It just wasn't particularly exciting. But what I do want to do, Stuart, is play devil's advocate. I thought about this earlier. Formula 3 and Formula 2 yesterday were brilliant. They were both really good again this morning. Formula E was awesome. We will have watched all of those. Had we not seen them, would we think this race was all right? Does that make sense? Have we set the bar a little bit too high coming into this one?
I honestly don't think so, because I mean, I think there were a lot of people who didn't watch those, and I mean, last year in particular, I wasn't watching Formula 2, so I didn't even have that comparison on the same track. I was watching Formula E. I think it's just kind of frustrating when you kind of know that the chance to attack, change positions, or work on a strategy that changes things around doesn't appear to be there. Because Formula One, I don't, for a long time, and probably for the rest of its life, won't be as overtakey as or argy-bargy as like Formula 2 and Formula E, and MotoGP, which is a massive overtaking fest. They're very exciting. It's a different breed. But I think some of like the energy and excitement from Formula One comes from there being potential to be there. So you might have a chase that goes on for 10 laps, and there's lots of defending and ducking and diving, and not necessarily an on-track change of position, but drivers have to be on their absolute best or anything could happen. And that's the kind of thing we've been used to. I mean, there were a couple of, I think we're talking about 2005, 2006, there were two back-to-back races at Imola, which is really, really hard to overtake. But both of those races, the second half of the race was Schumacher versus Alonso for the lead, and there were no overtakes, but they were weird. They were like wing to wing for like the last half of the race, and it was really exciting, even though the second place person absolutely could not get past. So yeah, so it's more, there's more about tension and strategy and build up and feeling potential and stuff. And when you don't feel that anything's going to happen, that's when Formula One races tend to kind of fall apart a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just sort of looking at chat as I threw that hand grenade in. Just for those asking, I'm 33. I've been watching since 1992, so I'm not a new, young, childish fan. And millennial doesn't mean you were born in the year 2000. I was born in 1986. God, that makes me feel old. I need to stop saying that. Anyway, Stuart, I know you're a little bit older than me, but we've been watching for a long time. I'm gonna be fair to those in chat. I'm only trying to wind people up, but be fair to those in chat. We've been watching for a long time. Formula One has never been 20, 22, 24, 26 drivers able to fight for the title. It has always been 2, 3 teams, sometimes even one team that go off and dominate. It's never been what Formula E is, what Formula 2 is, because it's not a spec series, and we never expect it to be. But going back to what you said right at the start of your point just there, Stuart, it's that expectation, expecting or hoping something's going to happen. And at the moment, we can generally go into a race with a grid and probably, maybe with the exception of 2 or 3 places, probably list a 1 to 20 and wouldn't be a million miles away. That's where the problem is. The midfield is still giving us some good racing, and there was some good stuff today. But back to what we've said, this is the 8th race, and this is probably the 8th time we said it in a reaction stream. It's back to TV direction. We don't see enough of that. We don't. And I know it did feel better today. We did seem to see more of the midfield, but that's because there was literally nothing happening up top. But as soon as Leclerc got on the back of Bottas, that was it. They were straight to the front again. And we missed, and we'll talk about Verstappen and Vettel in a moment, we missed probably the most controversial moment of the whole Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris, Kimi Raikkonen, all scrapping on the final lap. Basically what happened there was Lando Norris was struggling with some car issues. Daniel Ricciardo went for a move, went down the outside, I think it was turn 8, went off the track, rejoined unsafely, some might say, forced Lando Norris off the track, and then essentially kept his position, and then went and overtook Kimi Raikkonen with all 4 wheels off the track. That, I'm sorry, Ricciardo fans, that for me is slam dunk penalty. Forget the Lando Norris rejoining unsafely bit. He overtook Kimi Raikkonen with all 4 wheels over the white line.
Yeah, I do need to see more replays of that, but that did seem... We've seen people slam dunk for that many, many times, even when they're only slightly off the track. I think Hockenheim, the coming out of the hairpin in Hockenheim comes to mind. That people often been slammed for running wide on exit and overtaking through there. So, yeah, it's a shame. I know it got all messy because there are actually quite a lot of cars there and everyone was kind of trying to avoid each other. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the steward's office for that, especially when we're off Canada, when the stewards are like, the rules are the rules. And even if it upsets everyone. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. It's been quite an interesting weekend, actually, because of the nature of this track. There's been a lot of like running wide and then rejoining in various degrees of safe ways that have often involved two cars sort of almost coming together, and most of that's been shrugged off, much to the consternation of quite a few people. And I think that's another problem that's sort of come out of France now, is that we're immediately coming to this weekend and now we're scrutinising everything. We're like, well, that should have been an unsafe rejoin of the track. That's an unsafe rejoin of the track, which is actually, I don't think that's what we want to be as fans. We want to be like, just, get on with it. But, the bar's been set now.
Yeah, Annette in chat is the biggest Daniel Ricciardo fangirl I know, and she says it's a slam dunk penalty. So I think most would probably, like I said, forget the Lando Norris bit, but I think where he's clearly got four wheels off the track over the other side of the white line and overtaking Kimi Raikkonen, I think that is the bit that I would say was a penalty. They might look back at that one, but yeah, I agree. I mean, Sky have done my head in this weekend. Every time anybody's run wide, is that an unsafe return to the track? I just shut up, let it go. And of course, as fans who know the kickoff, and I'm sure Sky do as well from last time after Canada, every single time it said under investigation on screen, I cringed. I was like, oh no, here we go again, don't do it. But I think that's a penalty, certainly for the second part.
Yeah, I'm just watching it now because they've the official F1 Twitter account has just put the video clip up, and yeah, you're absolutely right. All four wheels off, wasn't on the track at all. Beyond almost both white lines because they sort of double line these tracks. So yeah, I can't help but agree with you there.
I keep looking at the replay of the Norris one. I mean, he comes back on track and he leaves the track, so he gains the position unfairly anyway because he can't make the corner. And then as he comes back on, Norris has to take evasive action. So I wonder if they might look at that and he might get two penalties. Or they might say, the first one he did first, so he gets a penalty for that. But I think one penalty, by the way, which was confusing to some. But I didn't actually see, Stuart. I can't remember if you said anything. You might have done. Sergio Perez. I think that was a penalty. Controversially, he went off, either lost control or was forced off, depending on who you listen to. Returned to the correct side of the bollard, absolutely 100% on the left-hand side, so that was absolutely fine. He's abided by the rules there. But he left the track behind a car and rejoined in front of it. That's leaving the track and gaining an advantage whether he went round that bollard or not. So, bollard or not, I think that is penalty all day long for him. It's a bit of an awkward one for fans because people say, well, hang on a minute, he's abided by the rule. How come he gets a penalty? But he has still gained a position whilst off track.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the bollard isn't the be-all, end-all. Otherwise, you could just, floor it across the chicane every time and just stay to the left of the bollard. It's not an auto. The bollard doesn't guarantee you'll have a slower line through that corner.
Certainly not at the start when you've got a bunched up field. Yeah,
exactly. And he very clearly left the track in he rejoined the track in a higher position than he left the track, which, is again gaining position off track, gaining an advantage by not using the play field. So yeah, he did do everything right, and I'd even give him, from his point of view in the cockpit, he may, because it was the start of the race and he probably isn't following every single car on the track around him. He may not have even known what position he left the track in and what position he rejoined the track in, or what had happened to the other cars around him. So and maybe you need to rely on the team at that point to sort of say, actually, you kind of overtook two cars there, so you probably should just slow it down. But again, 5 seconds, not that much. I know it was the price of a race win last race, but I think that's pretty much a slam dunk. And we don't want to. We want common sense to prevail. We don't want to have to write like really, really dense regulations to sort of. The bollard is a great idea because it means you have to deviate your line. You can't just burst straight back onto the track, and that's for safety as well. But it you can't give a black and white, hard and fast. This is exactly how you rejoin the track, and then we won't penalise you. Kind of rule. You kind of have to have some common sense. And if you gain positions, then you gain positions, and I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to go through the field as we usually do, but since we're talking penalties, there was another investigation. I think it was the only other investigation. Grosjean and Ricciardo early on. Apparently, Grosjean felt that Ricciardo rejoined the track unsafely, that they decided no further action or no investigation needed. I agree with that one. I don't think that was a penalty, but I've got to say this. I put it on Twitter because I was having a Larry after. I'm still feeling quite Larry and sarcastic now, but I'm trying to tone it back a little bit for the stream. I hope it's not Yeah, anyway. But basically, you've got drivers saying after Canada and all the interviews before this weekend, and in fact, most of them, I think, said the same. Leave us to it. We need to be allowed to race. We don't want the FIA involved in these situations. We have to sort it out. But then, as soon as it happens, there's a driver on team radio screaming at the FIA that was an unsafe release. Which is it? Either you want to be allowed to race and you don't want the FIA getting involved, or you do. Make up your mind, because that is just... The FIA then, the stewards are between a rock and a hard place. If they want the rules... The drivers want the rules to be relaxed. They can't then be over the radio a weekend later bitching that they want somebody to get a penalty because they rejoin the track unsafely. It can't be both. There is no middle ground on this.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I guess I know why they do it. It's not just to sort of just wring out every advantage they can, but also most of them have probably had things happen to them before, and this is a sort of problem we get into. Once we start setting precedents for things, then it becomes this kind of sort of whiny, moany, why didn't you get a penalty if I got a penalty thing as well? And I think what we need, which is kind of what they tried to do a couple of years ago, is we just need to relax how we approach the rules. And maybe that's a thing that can't happen until a new season, so that we have one season where stewards behave in the same way. So you don't have a very strict Canadian Grand Prix and a very lax French Grand Prix. I think then you start to end up in unfair areas. But yeah, I think if there's some communication, the stewards are like, okay, we're going to chill out. We're going to let you race wheel to wheel. We're going to let you sort of bump tires, as long as you're not deliberately like driving each other off the road or swerving in front or moving into braking zones in ways that could, actually cause a crash. Then, go for it. Then maybe they wouldn't bitch so much over the radio,
Yeah. No, I mean, there's got to be something there, hasn't there? You can't give, as some drivers said over the weekend, you can't give the likes of Kevin Magnussen a free run out there with no penalties. There's got to be something there. Sorry, Magnussen fans. He was the only one I could think of. But yeah, you can't give people a free run out there. There's got to be some regulation. But if the drivers want black and white rules, then they'll have to deal with black and white results or black and white decisions. It's as simple as that. They can't then complain that... well, they can. They shouldn't, is probably the correct word to use. But let's get back to the race itself. Verstappen and Vettel. Verstappen lonely race, I think, is probably the only way to put him. Did have a few, not moans, but complaints over team radio, some concerns over power early on. That seemed to go away, and he didn't really have the pace to keep up with those ahead. But he did keep Vettel at bay, although Vettel was closing in towards the end before he made his pit stop for fastest lap. But I think Verstappen, lonely race, and Vettel, well... I was disappointed. Again, this will get me so much stick. Right? It always does when I say this. When I said about Hamilton and all sorts, but Vettel strikes me as a driver, Stuart, who was just a bit down in the mouth this weekend, a bit down in the dumps. Wasn't happy about what happened in Canada. Obviously, felt the win was taken from him. Then wasn't happy with the FIA's decision not to review that. Then goes and puts it in 7th place. Has a few issues with his car and can't get his car hooked up. And then in the race, he only really recovers to 5th place. He just didn't seem on it this weekend at all.
No, yeah, again, I mean, he was the one that sort of had the lonely race, and he ended up on a different strategy, trying to stretch out his first stint, but that didn't work because he made a mistake and fluffed the tires from locking up. Yeah, very weird little weekend for him. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I think he just wasn't hooked up in this. I mean, he definitely wasn't hooked up in the same way that Leclerc was. He only qualified 7th. But I think we're also seeing Red Bull close the gap to Ferrari as well. And I think that's reflective in the points as well. It's sort of a little bit maybe masked by Gasly, who we probably discuss at some point. But I think Red Bull have closed up Ferrari, and Ferrari have not closed up to Mercedes. So now that's where the closest sort of fight is at the top. And I think Max did again exactly what he was expected to do and no more, and came forth quite comfortably. I'm glad his problems went away, because we sort of need Max among it all, even if sometimes he isn't actually like interacting with anyone on the track. He had a good first lap. It was kind of a shame the first few corners ended up the way they did, because it was very nearly things ending up in a very different order, but it all kind of shook out through that first chicane in the end. But everyone was trying desperately to get an extra position.
Yeah, we need Max up there. I completely agree. He makes it interesting, doesn't he, when things go a bit quiet? I mean, he didn't like it when I think it was Natalie Pinkham put it to him that he makes the race interesting. He said something pre-race about how he doesn't want to be in trouble, and Natalie Pinkham was sort of saying, well, making things interesting doesn't mean that you're in trouble, and he was like, well, for me it does. So I quite like that interview with Max. I liked Max Verstappen anyway, but I liked 2019 Verstappen, mature and still racy and aggressive. So yeah, just I think both of them just got on with it. But disappointed Vettel. Question marks over Ferrari's strategy quickly. Do you think it looked like once again they were hedging their bets for a safety car, left him out too long? Would there have been better again? I know with the benefit of hindsight, maybe pitting as soon as Verstappen did, reacting to that.
I mean, possibly, but he probably wasn't. They probably looked at the numbers. I know we've seen Ferrari fluff strategy before, but they're not. They're not literally running around with just a pocket calculator. They are they are running on numbers. They do have real data. I think they probably looked at the numbers and they thought, just mirroring, the people around us, Leclerc, Verstappen, whoever, isn't going to gain us any headway. Running a bit longer and just offsetting our stints a little bit isn't that harmful and could reap the rewards if a safety car comes. So let's just try that and see how it goes. And absolute minimum, we'll have slightly fresher tires at the end that might work out if we're well positioned. So I don't think it was a classic Ferrari mess up. I think it was just like, this is the only thing we could probably try to gain a position. Otherwise, we're just going to be sort of stuck where we are. Because clearly people were not overtaking. So mirroring everyone around you is probably just going to lock you into the track order that you're already in. So it was worth trying something. And again, it didn't quite work. They weren't able to do exactly what they wanted to do because Vettel wasn't able to run longer because he flat spotted his tire. But I could see why they did it. It didn't seem like a complete foolhardy move.
Yeah. We will talk about McLaren and the rest of the top 10, the rest of the field in just a moment. But whilst we're sort of hovering around Red Bull with Verstappen, we've got to talk about Gasly. We've got to talk about Pierre. Oh, Pierre. That was crap, wasn't he? I'm sorry, Stuart. I can't. He was crap all weekend. Qualified 9th despite being on the softer tyre. Couldn't get anywhere near those ahead of him. Was outraced by Norris, Hulkenberg, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Sainz, and of course his teammate Max Verstappen. Absolutely a shocking weekend. And I don't think we're talking about him being dropped before Austria for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's Red Bull's home race. They won't want the negative press. Number two, it's only a week away, so they're not really going to have time to get somebody in. But I certainly think that if he doesn't pull his finger out of his backside in the next 4 races, he could be looking at being dropped by the summer break. And there is a Russian in a Toro Rosso doing an absolutely fantastic job this season and has surprised a lot of people. So he's got to pull his finger out and he's got to do it quickly.
Yes, we are starting to worry. And I did defend him, I think, whenever the last time we were chatting, and in that the first 2 couple of races did whatever you call the opposite of flattering to deceive. They kind of he had a dreadful first couple of races, but then after that, he's obviously nowhere near Verstappen, but he was scoring the points, sort of finishing 5th and 6th, which is kind of where you'd expect him to be as the Red Bull number two driver. But yeah, he's kind of Verstappen's really showing him up, I think, and I definitely think Red Bull are missing Ricciardo. And look at they're only about 40 points as a team behind Ferrari. If Ricciardo had been in that second Red Bull, they would be a lot closer, if not challenging for it, because Verstappen's crisscrossing with Vettel for that 3rd place in the Drivers' Championship. So yeah, not great. Again, I hope, as I've said many times with people in the Red Bull pipeline, that he's being coached and managed well within the Red Bull family, because things do look a bit pear-shaped and it's easy to kind of lose your way and mentally, psychologically, and you need to be able to pick yourself up again and fight back, which could be hard when you think, I've got one of the hottest seats in F1, my teammates trouncing me and Red Bull are treating me like crap, which is how they've tended to treat their drivers. So yeah, I can't imagine he's in a great mindset. I do want to give him more chances because obviously we know he's not a bad driver, but he needs to do something. He was one of only 2 drivers that started on the soft tyre, which again put him in a really awkward position for the race. But he only lost positions, which is kind of when you started ninth on the grid is not what you want from a Red Bull.
No, I mean, yeah, strategy wasn't great, but he should, on paper. I know races are never won on paper or run on paper, but he should be beating Raikkonen. He should be beating the Renaults. He should be beating the McLarens if his teammate is. I know Max Verstappen is driving his backside off in that car, and we know the talent he's got and the natural speed he's got. And Gasly, it's his first season. I agree. He does need. See, if I were in Red Bull's position, I would keep him to the end of the season, give him the full season, see if he does improve. But he was. And I genuinely think if Christian Horner was to make the decision, he would be there until the end of the season. However, he's not going to make the decision. Helmut Marko will make the decision. And I am concerned that we get to the summer break and he will be dropped. And I can't honestly sit here and say that I would totally disagree with the decision if he doesn't improve. But what's frustrating for me from the Gasly point of view is, as you touched on there, he did pick up. Things were improving. His drive in China was solid. He did what he needed to do. I think he was sixth, which is what the absolute minimum Red Bull needing to do in races. He would have scored well in Baku as well and recovered well had he not had the mechanical problems. He drove well in Monaco, drove okay in Spain. Canada wasn't great. This weekend wasn't great. He's just a guy under pressure. But he was rushed into that team because Daniel Ricciardo decided to disappear. That's the problem. And the issue that Red Bull have is who replaces him, because the only driver, in my opinion, that would be anywhere near ready to step into that seat is Daniel Kvyat, because Alexander Albon is in his first year. He's done 8 races for Toro Rosso, and people think that he's a really good option. If you put Alexander Albon in that car, you'll likely have the same problem you have with Gasly, because he's had even less time to prepare for that. So it's Kvyat or Gasly in that seat for the rest of the season from the summer break. But I'd say Red Bull are going to finish third. They're not going to finish ahead of Ferrari, whoever they put in that second car. That's my personal opinion. They're not going to lose out to McLaren and Renault behind. Next season is all going to be about evolution and not revolution, because they're prepping for 2021. Why panic about it? Why not give him the season? And if you get to the end of November, beginning of December, when the season finishes, and he still hasn't improved and he's still not good enough, then you let him go. Because at least then you can say we gave him the full season. But I think what might save him is the lack of options for Red Bull at the end of the day. And I can't. Part of me can see Helmut Marko ditching him in the summer break, but there's also part of me that thinks that he won't want to swallow his pride twice on Kvyat. Do you know what I mean? And I can't see them taking an Ocon because he's got the Mercedes ties, and they're not going to take a Ferrari driver or anything like that. Although they did take Kvyat, so maybe. But yeah, the options aren't there, and not Dan Ticktum. He's not even got the super license points, let alone being ready.
Yeah, it's Red Bull have tied themselves in knots for quite a few years, actually. And we're seeing a sense of deja vu, actually, people getting rushed up to that seat. And it stems from a problem that sort of started a couple of years back, when their well of young drivers in their program sort of dried up, in the sense that there wasn't really a flush of people ready to step up to an F1 seat, which is kind of why they ended up getting Kvyat back, and also why they ended up getting Hartley back, because Hartley had also been dropped from the Red Bull program before he was rehired, because they needed to replace their Toro Rosso seats. And actually, how good is this Red Bull program? Because they kind of relying on I don't know what the phrase is, but sort of capturing magic in a bottle, which they did with Vettel, which they did to an extent with Ricciardo, which they definitely have done with Verstappen. I mean, Verstappen and Vettel are their crown jewels of the Red Bull Young Driver program. But how many drivers have we seen come and go and sort of disappear? We've seen I think Bourdais was part of it. Lots of people who sort of you see in Formula E and IndyCar and just sort of floating around and stuff have sort of just come and gone. Kvyat being one of them, but he's back in because they ran out of seats. Albon definitely shouldn't be promoted, because that's just the same thing all over again, as you said. So yeah, and I can see why they would replace Gasly mid-season. It's exactly the same reason they've been replacing people mid-season, sort of in years gone by in both their teams. And the reason is they sort of every year they realize that since the hybrid era began, since the Mercedes era began, they realized, we're not going to be challenging for the title this year. We might get a couple of wins, but there's nothing really on the table here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build to next year. Next year is the year when we're going to challenge for the title and the wins and get back on shape again. And to do that, we're going to need 2 great drivers. I don't believe in Kvyat or Gasly or whoever this year. I don't think he's the one to do it, because he's mucking about. So let's promote someone from Toro Rosso and try them out in the races we've got left. I think 2017 they were just chucking drivers at the Toro Rosso. They did Hartley and Gasly were promoted just to see what they could do, and I think that's their mindset right now, is that they keep thinking they're on the verge of greatness and that they need to make sure they have two good drivers in that seat to be able to properly challenge, and they're not. So yeah, I agree. I mean, this year there's no real reason to replace him this year, because obviously they're fighting for not very much, third place, maybe second place if they can keep improving. But again, they're going to be looking at 2020. But 2020 again might be a stopgap year, because 2021 is when the rules will change. So they put themselves in a tricky position. And as I've said over and over again, I think they need to work on managing their drivers better. They've definitely got talented drivers, and somehow they're just letting them waste away. I don't think Gasly is a bad driver. I think Gasly, in a different team, just based on how Red Bull treat their drivers, maybe succeeding better and not looking as bad as he is now, or at least be able to develop across the season more. That's sort of my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember as well when we talk about Gasly, this weekend aside, he wasn't good this weekend, but we have to remember that Max Verstappen is a hell of a talent, and he is driving the wheels off that Red Bull. But I always felt like this year was a transitional year for Red Bull, and maybe you're right. Maybe next year as well, as they prepare for 2021, those rules get announced in October, all get signed off. Maybe then they put all focus on 2021 and just develop the car ready for 2020, and then they can, focus on turning things around there. But perhaps very quickly, because this is going into a driver speculation stream all of a sudden. But do you think maybe going forward, if they are going to start chucking drivers in the bin so quickly, do you think Red Bull need to maybe look at a change of strategy when it comes to drivers? Hulkenberg's been linked. Perez will inevitably be linked if Hulkenberg is, because that seems to be what happens when one's linked, the other is. Do you think they need to look at a change of strategy long term? Or is having a Gasly who can just about maybe do the job and pick up odd points be enough for them to balance what Max Verstappen does, looking at what Ferrari did with Schumacher and the likes of Barrichello, for example?
I mean, yeah, quite possibly. I found in general the shift that sort of, it definitely started with Red Bull, but we're seeing lots of teams do it now, where you've actually, the big teams in particular, but even people like McLaren and Renault and stuff, have these driver programs, and that's where they eventually get their talent from. We're seeing less sort of mixing around between teams, and Red Bull aren't going to steal Leclerc or Hamilton, are they? I mean, I'm sure they'd love to, but it's sort of not part of their program. They're always just bringing people up from their youth program, and it's kind of making everyone a little bit inflexible, and it's kind of messing things up a bit. I mean, I'd love to pull in like Hulkenberg. I have no gauge anymore of how good Hulkenberg is. It's kind of confusing. Again, in the same way, actually, I think I have no. It's hard. It's really hard to gauge Gasly, because I think it's shades of last year Van Dorn versus Alonso, where Alonso is able to show something better in the car than like most drivers would, and maybe that car is not as good as it looks in Verstappen's hands, and it is a struggle if you're in your second season of F1 and not this kind of super talent that Verstappen. It's very, very tricky. But I'd love to see a little bit more fluidity in driver movement on the grid, just in general. I mean, we saw Ocon essentially not able to get a drive this year purely for the reason that he was linked to Mercedes.
Yeah, being part of a driver academy can certainly help you, but it can also hinder you, can't it, quite a bit? But let's get back to the race. A couple of drivers that flew under the radar a little bit today, very quickly. Hulkenberg and Norris. Norris didn't. Hulkenberg and Raikkonen, both pretty solid drives. 9th for Hulkenberg, 8th for Raikkonen. Of course, that could change with the investigation on Ricciardo. Just check Twitter. There's nothing at the moment on whether he's got a penalty or not, so I'll keep an eye on that in the stream and let you know if I see anything. But yeah, I think... Do you know what? I've got to be completely honest sat here, Stuart. I couldn't tell you what they did in the race, but they're there. They're in the points, and I guess that's what as those midfield teams need, is just to pick up those points. I don't really know what to say, because I feel really terrible sat here saying I don't really remember seeing a lot of them, but there they are.
Yeah, they certainly finished the race in the top 10. Yeah, it was a funny one, wasn't it? I'm in the early part of the weekend, they were actually a little bit downcast, and they weren't talking up their chances. They thought they'd be a lot better here, and they thought they're sort of technical grip would suit them here, and it never quite came together. But yeah, they were pretty solid. They did a good race. Daniel Ricciardo was able to like snag. They were both able to snag points at the end actually with the Lando Norris incident, which I feel really bad about. But yeah, I think they'll go away happy. It's a shame we didn't really know what was going on with them, but I think there was a lot of lonely races out there, and people just sort of probably had to get on the radio at the end and be like, "So where did we finish?" Because I didn't see anyone.
Yeah, I was just looking at chat. A couple of people in chat saying that they actually had a really good battle through the race, and Net saying that they were within a second for about 35 laps. So I just don't remember seeing. I might be wrong. I might have been too Larry on Twitter to have seen what was going on, but I don't remember seeing a huge amount of them. But I'm glad that there was a bit of battling going on between them. I do like Kimi. He's been on form this weekend away from the track. But yeah, absolutely. I think they're there, aren't they? They've picked up the points they needed to. And Hülkenberg, 12th, 13th on the grid, something like that. So good recovery there. Raikkonen as well. Got to give them credit for that. But I think the team that I need to talk about now, both of them, McLaren. What happened? This team were dead. They were buried. It was over. No chance they were going to ever be able to compete at the front of the grid. I've sat here on streams and said they'll never win a world championship again. Hell of a long way to go if they're going to challenge for a championship. But what a massive step forward this weekend, a massive step in the right direction for them. Well, they're 5th and 6th in qualifying, 6th for Sainz, 10th for Norris, probably would have been 7th without his reliability issue. Both drivers brilliant, team fantastic this weekend. I said it in yesterday's qualifying report. I stay impartial on these things because I am a neutral in Formula One, but it is fantastic from a personal perspective to see McLaren, at least for one weekend, up the sharp end of the grid, and everyone, aside from Norris's problems today, smiling. Absolutely fantastic, Stuart. Brilliant.
Yes, I'm delighted for them, and there's, I think that is something particular that people sometimes sort of misunderstand. You could be a neutral Formula One fan, but want success upon people. You want McLaren to be back up there. I want Williams to be back up there, and I'm very neutral on Williams in particular. Or you could be like the biggest Hamilton fan ever and be despondent that he hasn't been challenged for like 5 years. But yeah, lovely. I hope this is the start of great things. We know that the ebb and flow in the midfield is very, very strong this year. So they may turn up to Austria and be sort of the 7th best team there. But they're 4th in the championship right now. They've been there for quite a while. This is looking like finally a year where they're sort of making a step up, and that's great for them. And we saw them celebrating 6th and 7th on the grid at the end of qualifying, which is, I grew up, my journey to Formula was the late 90s. That's when I started. So if you'd have told me that McLaren would have been celebrating 6th and 7th on the grid one day, I would have been gobsmacked. But yeah, here we are, and I'm genuinely happy for them. They're a great team, and they've got great drivers, and you can't help but feel like you wish good things to happen to them. We'll see how this continues. Yeah. It's a shame that technical problems befell Norris at the end, but if the race had finished a lap earlier, things would have been very different. And they're still collecting points, and I think Norris will be down in the dumps for like a few hours, but realize that actually this was a really good weekend, and they're gonna
meme it.
Hope exactly. He's so good on the media. I don't know if you saw on Sky him sort of talking to his qualifying lap with Anthony Davidson. He was so on it, and it was really, really good. I don't think anyone sort of is as connected to the media as he is. He's really on it.
It was that bit where George Russell turned up, and George Russell went, "I've come to see what I could learn," and Norris turned to him and went, "You could learn a lot, mate." I just thought that was brilliant. But take a deep breath, Stuart. If you're excited about 6th and 7th in qualifying, they actually qualified 5th and 6th.
Oh my god!
I know. Exciting stuff.
It's amazing. Yes, it's true, because it was 3rd row of the grid they locked out. That's right. Amazing stuff. We're probably not going to see them on the podium unless something weird happens this year. But it's nice to see them up there, and it's nice to see them be able to celebrate. I would love to see other teams get the chance to celebrate. I'd love to see Williams get a point, because I'm sure they'd be delighted with that. That's we need to see some of these teams who've been having a hard time of late getting something, because they're all great people. There's no real evil guys in this paddock. Rich energy aside.
I'm with you if somebody told me 20 years ago McLaren would be ecstatic with 5th and 6th on the grid, I'd have laughed in their face. Like, you're stupid. Don't be stupid. They should be up there winning races. But no, awesome weekend. for them. I feel like I should talk about them more, but I'm going to give them loads of praise again tomorrow. So by the end of tomorrow, I'm just going to get, you're such a fanboy, comments over on YouTube. But very quickly through the rest of the field, because although we were concerned about not being able to fill this, the Gasly chat and the other talk about penalties has kind of filled us quite nicely here, Stuart. But we will go through not really much to say, I don't think, through the rest of the field massively. Perez and Stroll, disappointing weekend for Racing Point, but kind of where they expected to be according to, what's their boss's name? Otmar Safnauer. So no great surprise there. Toro Rosso, disappointing for them given the season they've had so far, but still 14th and 15th. Probably where they expected to be this weekend. Would have liked to have seen more from both of them because I do like that team and I do like those drivers. Antonio Giovinazzi, though, strategy, a bit like Gasly, started on the softs, didn't he? And it all kind of went wrong from they turned to bubblegum, I think, as some of the drivers were saying, after about 5 laps. And he struggled on them for a few more, but had to come in and change them. He ended up on a 2-stop strategy. Magnussen, Haas, a rubbish weekend for them. Gunther Steiner describing it as probably the worst they've had since the team was started. That's how bad he feels it was. But big shout out as well for Kubica for finishing ahead of Russell. And I've genuinely not been patronising. That is an achievement down at Williams for Robert Kubica. 9 seconds up the road from his teammate, who did make an extra pit stop, it should be said. But it's a little boost for Kubica. It's not much, it's only 18th, but he's beaten his teammate in a race. And from what we've seen so far this season, Stuart, I think that'll be a little victory for him. Again, trying not to be too condescending, but what can you say about Williams 18th and 19th?
Yeah, you have to sort of take them as they are at the moment. I didn't actually follow in the end why Russell ended up taking that extra pit stop, but clearly Kubica did not have to do that.
Damaged front wing, I think.
Oh, well, there you go. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'd love to know from Kubica himself what his benchmarks are. I'm sure he's happy he finished ahead of Russell, I guess, but he's probably not happy he finished 18th. But then again, he might be happy that he only finished 2 laps down from the leader. There may be like personal goals within the team that they're working to that dictate how they feel after each race. And they're just in a completely different race, aren't they? Let's be honest. And it's sort of every race is a testing session for them, and their goals are going to be very, very different. And yeah, I don't know what the mindset's like in there, but I'm hoping they sort of set their expectations realistically so they can come out of it thinking this is what we needed to achieve today. Good job, guys. I really hope they're building to something next year and they can just sort of figure out what it is, because they were the only team who's actually gone backwards since last year. They're the only team who's actually going slower lap on lap than their previous year's car, which is oops. Yeah, what can you say about them really, other than I hope there's something going on behind the scenes that's a decent program that's helping them build up to the years to come.
They need to be doing something, because it's not, like you say, it sounds silly, doesn't it? But personal goals, only 2 laps down, only, in air quotes, 71 seconds behind Magnussen. That, in Australia, that would have been 3 laps and 91 seconds. So maybe there is a little bit in there to read into it, but we've got to talk about Romain Grosjean. We wouldn't be fair on Dan if we didn't mention. I'd imagine he's still crying. Thoroughly miserable weekend for Grosjean. I think that's the only way to describe it. Not a good qualifying, not happy in practice over team radio, not a great race, just thoroughly miserable for a home Grand Prix. And he hasn't shown great racecraft. I'm going to go into this in a video after Austria when I talk about drivers under pressure, so I don't want to say too much, but he's not shown great racecraft this year. I will say that right now. But he also has had basically no luck. So he's not delivering in the races when he's got the luck, but he also hasn't got the luck, if that makes sense, Stuart. So he's kind of like double whammy and he just can't perform. Really feel for Grosjean, but I think even Dan said coming into this season, he thoroughly expected that this would be his last year. And I think, especially given some of his words about the team pre-race, saying that he thinks Haas need to start taking responsibility and stop blaming the tyres, Gunther Steiner ain't going to stand for that. So just, I can't help but feel for him, though. It's another mechanical issue.
Yeah, it's true, but he retired from what position? Not,
yeah, exactly.
He wasn't threatening. I've always really liked Grosjean. I've kind of always supported him in my own way, especially when he came back. I think he had a dodgy sort of first stint when he joined Renault to replace Nelson Piquet Jr., I think, before he went away for a bit and then came back. But yeah, this year I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, this probably is going to be his last year, and probably should be his last year. He's kind of, I think, had his go at F1, and there's plenty of people who'd like a seat. It'd be very interesting to see if he is in F1 next year. But I think, and I think it's very clear he's on the edge. Like, he's feeling the pressure because he can't get overtaken these days without coming on the radio to say, "Did you see that? That was unfair. He pushed me wide, or he got past me when I didn't want him to." It's kind of a bit sad, actually. He's the moaniest. He's the moaniest person on the grid about other drivers. I mean, I think Hamilton's still the moaniest person on the grid because he'll always find something weird to moan about, whether his shoes are too tight or something.
Do you think Hamilton does it to troll us, though? Do you think he realises a race is... Because he often says, doesn't he, that it wasn't a great race and he wouldn't have enjoyed watching as a fan. Do you think he ever sits there and goes, something broke on my seat, that'll get people excited? I know he wouldn't. I'm just joking, but I could just... he often says, doesn't he, the races are pants and he wouldn't want to watch it as a fan, so maybe he does come over team radio to keep us all talking, maybe.
I mean, I'm definitely not a conspiracy theorist, but as each race has gone on, I've been thinking, is he doing this? Is he literally just trying to put some drama into the race? Because there are so many races where he's leading via canter and still complaining about stuff, and you just want to be like, shut up.
Yeah. like today, my something broke on my seat. Next lap sets the fastest lap. Yeah, oh, all right, Lewis, whatever.
Yeah, I think Verstappen would be like, I'll take a broken seat in an 18-second gap to the second place if you want to swap.
Yeah, what? Somebody put on Twitter, something Hamilton complaining about his seat and then put Ocon, I'll take it. Something like that, which I quite liked. That was good. But yeah, Grosjean, I think, yeah. Personally, sorry, Dan, if you're listening, you're probably not because we're going to give him some jip, but I would have got rid of Grosjean at the end of last year. So I certainly think this is last year. But at the same time, I do feel sorry for him. But again, like you said, it's not like he retired from fifth, is it? So he's got to be delivering when the opportunities are there. But let's move on super quickly to some... That's not going to work. Come on, Sean, wake up. To some tweets, some reaction to the race, and we'll do driver of the day as well. So I'll tell you what, Stuart, whilst I'm looking for some quotes and chat as well with a surname, let us know in chat. Apologies, mods, in advance. Who was your driver of the day? What do you think, Stuart? Who was yours? Lando Norris, I think, won the official one.
I would definitely give it to Norris. I think he drove a great race, and I think, especially in those, even though he did lose 3 places at the end through slightly controversial circumstances, but a dying car mainly is what caused that. He held on really bravely with the issues he was having. His hydraulics were failing, which was causing a series of problems throughout the car. He drove a great race. He did lose a position to Sainz, to be fair, from the grid. But if not him, maybe Raikkonen, because Raikkonen sort of did one of his classic. He had a hell of a race. He was largely anonymous, but you look around and there he is, sitting in 8th place, basically the only one picking up the points for Alfa Romeo, as they're called now. So, if not him, Raikkonen's in for a shout. I don't think you can really give it to any of the top 5 who, as we sort of said, just kind of did what we expected them to do and no more. Anyone in your mind that sort of sticks out?
The only one I would throw into that mix, Carlos Sainz, I think McLaren as a whole should be thrown into that one. But I think Nico Hülkenberg deserves a mention. I don't think I'd give it to him. That probably could have been worded a hell of a lot better than that. I don't think I'd have given him driver of the day. But I think he deserves a... it's so hard not to manage the issues he had, and for his weekend as a whole, Lando Norris, absolutely, I think, is right up there. The problem is, he did finish 10th, okay, with the issues. Kimi Raikkonen, in a car that was probably much slower than the McLaren, and probably slower than the Renaults, ended up in 8th place. So I would probably... I'm going to go back and watch highlights of the race tomorrow before I do my debrief, but as it is at the moment, did you hear the eye roll there when I said that? At the moment I would lean towards Raikkonen, but I need to watch a couple of other bits to see if there's anything I missed before I go and commit to that completely. But over on Twitter, Jack Chambers, the self-proclaimed chief moderator, said, I honestly didn't think it was a bad race, but that could just be sleep deprivation. Norris, my driver of the day, gutted about the last lap, but stewards could change all that. Lewis, apologies to Lewis. He's designing a logo for something, which I'll show you some sketches later, Stuart. But yeah, he's designing a logo for something. I'm doing his head in with it because I cannot make my mind up. But he says 95% was a bore fest. The last couple of laps in the battle for 7th was good, and I'll be surprised if Danny Rick gets away without some sort of penalty. His driver of the day was Lando. Dan kind of agrees with me and says Raikkonen, he's still got it, so I might have to change my mind. I don't want to be agreeing with Dan because that is a concern. Jeff's 3-word race review was crap. Philip, please talk about how pathetic Gasly was yet again. We've discussed Gasly in this one. Olivia says, oh, we have to mention it. Olivia was going to say Raikkonen, but then Lando brought his car home in the points, so he wins it for me. And what a race. That was a race. I thought it was a parade. I'm sorry, I normally read a few more, but I've got to go to this. Raikkonen in Formula 2, 9 penalty points. It's not funny, Sean. 9 penalty points in one race. He's got a race ban for Austria. He couldn't do a 3-point turn in Baku. To the point where his engineer or somebody had to explain to him that in order to execute a 3-point turn, you had to turn the steering wheel. He is consistently 4 to 7 seconds a lap slower than anybody anywhere near him. He went from 12th to last in a space of a lap and a half today and was 8 seconds back after about 5 laps. How is he racing in Formula 2, Stuart? It's an absolute joke. That's money for you right there. Oh, dear.
I mean, it really puts Grosjean to shame, doesn't it?
He does. He really does.
Like, penalty points and farce. Yeah, it's not great, isn't it? 9 penalty points in one race is quite phenomenal, and all for the same thing, as far as I'm aware. Just not a
virtual safety car procedure.
Safety car, that's like
basics.
But you've also got to like ask him, like, is there no one on the radio to him? Is there no one that's like saying, at least you mugged up the first safety car thing, right? Next time, yeah. And I imagine he'll be back after Austria.
Cha-ching.
Exactly. But I can't see him troubling the F1 paddock anytime soon, which, again, I mean, is, a positive thing to say about these new super license rules, which I think have allowed. I think the field now is, for the last couple of years, has been much, much more talented that we've seen. We haven't had these kind of weird pay drivers that don't really belong there, because they can't get promoted until they've actually proven themselves to be mildly successful. So yeah, at least there's that. I mean, there are some downsides to that, and that's more like that's for a whole another day. But yeah, if you haven't watched F2 and you want to see what it would be like if Mr. Bean entered motor racing, then that's
harsh on Mr. Bean.
Oh yeah, hilarious.
I will say before I will carry on reading some more. Don't worry. We will move on from F2, but I do just want to quickly say I know the rule is that he's banned from the next round, but it is ridiculous that his driving was considered bad enough for 9 points through 3 different infractions that were for the same thing. It is ridiculous he was allowed to start the race today. I gave Jonty an example earlier through DMs on Discord. I said, what if we had the same format in Formula 1 and the same rules, and Grosjean had caused his 2012 crash in Belgium on the Saturday and was allowed to start on the Sunday? If a driver is deemed to have broken the rules and therefore has earned a race ban and is therefore deemed too dangerous to be racing, why are they then allowed to start the next day and their ban comes into effect from Austria? He should have been banned from this morning and for Austria. That's just my... I know we haven't really got any time. I don't know if you want to say anything that very quickly, Stuart, but...
No, yeah, I haven't got much to add to that. I mean, I agree with you. I'm only assuming that's because there probably isn't a third driver on standby.
Yeah.
They don't want to screw the team. But you're right. If he's a dangerous driver, then he's a dangerous driver, and it seems weird to sort of postpone that. But yeah, you're right. I don't have much to talk.
I think the rule is basically banned for the next round, which means that he's still racing in the French round in the sprint race. It's a bit of a weird one, but yeah. No joke, that was the first race I fell asleep during for years, which was the FIA steward, the fake FIA steward. They fell asleep in Canada. It was okay, 7 out of 10, but definitely Lando for driver of the day. Lando unlucky again, says Thomas. Thomas says 2020 is going to be great. And 2 more super quickly. Nikki says, I don't know why I bother watching the race anymore. I mean, we already know the result beforehand. And one more, we've got to give it a mention. Come on, Redman says The Rolling Bollard. That'd be a cracking name for a podcast, Stuart, The Rolling Bollard. Maybe I'll go for a rebrand. That'll do. The Rolling Bollard podcast. We'll be back. No, yeah, I think that's about all we can say on the race. I have a look at chat. Actually, I've kind of not ignored that. I was annoying people earlier with my millennial moment. I hope my sense of humour comes across. By the way, I am very dry in my sense of humour. I don't. Sometimes when I take what people consider a pop, I'm not actually having a go. I'm just being sarcastic. Stuart knows I'm quite dry with it sometimes. So I don't mean any offence if I tell someone to shut up. If I want you to shut up, you just get blocked. I'm just messing about. What have we got for driver of the day then? Magath says Kvyat, Russell for Alfie, Guardian of the Blind says Lando, Dominic says Sainz, Norris for Daniel, McLaren is that? Sorry. Thomas says Lando, Carlos Sainz. I think there's going to be a lot of love for McLaren this weekend. Understandably, Kimi for Raoul, Raikkonen driver of the day for Kieran, Raikkonen, Sainz, Kimi, yeah. The Bollard. I think we're going to hear a lot about the Bollard over the next week, but much nicer than having to hear about penalties and track limits and stuff like that. So, yeah, a lot of love for McLaren in there. A lot of love for Kimi as well, which is good to see. I think he did drive well today. I'm going to go back and watch the race or highlights, not watching the full thing again, watching highlights to see how he got on, see what I missed. Bottas. Somebody said Bottas. No, I can't. Nothing against him. A lot of people saying Lando. So yes, we shall. We'll leave it there on that little bit of chat. Is there anything that I've not gone over, Stuart, from this race, or if chat can think of anything I've not mentioned? I think I've gone through every single driver and every single team. So that's all I can really do. And there wasn't really a huge amount of action. But if F1 are listening, which they won't be, feel free to follow the midfield a bit more closely if the races are a little bit flat up top. It's probably all I'd say to finish that bit off.
Which they did do a lot last year. I don't know why they've sort of lost their way with that. I felt, 2017, 2018, they had really got their act together and they were like noticing where the real battles were throughout the field. And we got to see stories of Force Indias versus Hasses and stuff when that was brewing up. But this year they're kind of not noticing as much, which is really interesting.
Definitely needs to improve. It did feel better. I said that earlier. It does feel better. But couple of things before I go. Andras's weekly super chats have come through, so thank you very much, mate. He said, I have been to funerals more entertaining. Oh, mate. Thanks for that. I'm off to go and cry somewhere. And also, forget the race. What about Raghunathan Ban? We've been over that one, mate. So, yes, thank you very much for your contributions as ever. Always try and get to super chats at the end when I remember. But, yeah, not a huge amount to say on that one. Championship-wise, I think we're pretty much there. Really. To quote the great Murray Walker, you never know. After all, if it's Formula One spelled backwards. Of course it is Murray. You never know. But I think
I will say I think position 1 in both championships is probably guaranteed. I am increasingly interested to see whether Red Bull can catch Ferrari, and I'm increasingly interested to see who can get 4th in the Constructors' Championship. I think there's a real fight there, and it's worth a lot of money. So, keep your eyes there. And, obviously there's a lot more action in the midfield and kind of a lot more interesting characters as well. So, yeah, keep your eye on that 4th place. McLaren have it at the moment, but it's not safe by any means.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're only watching Formula One for the World Championships, then yeah, it probably is done. But if you like us and you're a bit of a neutral and you enjoy the whole thing, then don't look away, because that midfield with development as well this year, because I don't think there'll be much development next year with all the changes to 2021. They're not going to want to spend a huge amount of money in that midfield, are they? So I still think that there's going to be quite a lot of development between now and the end of the season, and that's going to change the midfield constantly as we go. So it's definitely worth tuning in for Formula 1.5. If nothing else. But even so, as you said right at the start of this, Stuart, even if the championships are decided, we're still going to get races where we get some drama and excitement towards the sharp end of the grid, because as much as Mercedes are dominating, I would be very, very surprised. This could come back to bite me quite hard in December. I will be very surprised if Mercedes win every single Grand Prix. Flash forward to December, Mercedes win every single Grand Prix. Yeah.
Which, if they keep winning every Grand Prix, once we sort of get somewhere into the second half, it then sort of becomes exciting in a whole different way, because you then start saying, you kind of hope they do, because it's such an unprecedented thing to happen. And and you start, if they start getting challenged for the win, you start kind of rooting for them in a weird way. So, maybe that's what we've got to look forward to. Maybe we actually got to wait for total domination and to sort of be witness to that.
Just have a quick check on Twitter before we disappear to see if there has been any penalty for Daniel Ricciardo.
I'll play devil's trolling us.
I will play devil's advocate and say it's nice to see they're taking their time and and not just jumping to a decision. What have they got? Their official Drivers' Championship has been released with Ricciardo on 22 points. So I've not got anything there. Give me 2 seconds while I just super quickly, if I can open the right flipping folder, would be really, really helpful, Sean. I think that's where he was before. So yeah, no decision as it stands on Daniel Ricciardo. I'd be very surprised if there's a penalty there. Some people are saying there's a 10-second penalty in chat, but I don't know if that's trolling us or if it's true.
I think it's trolling.
So if he has got a 10-second penalty and you're listening to this and we were wrong, then I do apologise. But at the moment, it does say that there's no change to the results or anything like that. So I'd be surprised if we don't get a penalty. But we'll leave it there, Stuart, because I'm rambling, because, why not? Thank you very much for popping along for this one. I know it wasn't the best. I mean, we've seen worse, as we've said before in this one, but we have only got to wait a week to get over this. So, and I it's not my favourite race of the year, Austria. Controversially, I'm not a big fan of it, but it is quick there, and we might get a bit of drama. And last year, of course, first Mercedes double retirement for a mechanical failure since the 50s, so who knows?
Yes, we can always thank God we've always got that to look forward to. But I mean, Austria is tend to be good. I'm glad it's back on the calendar. It's a funny old track with lots of elevation changes and sharp corners, and it's also one of the very high altitude tracks. So a chance for Red Bull to pull something back. We don't know what's going to happen. You're right. We've only got a short time before we have to forget this race and move on to the next one, and just fingers crossed. Something happens.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, if it all goes wrong for Ferrari, they have always got Plan F.
Exactly. I want to reiterate, I still am optimistic about the rest of the season on a sort of race by race basis, which I think is how you watch F1 most of the time, because most of the time there is a level of dominance. So, as long as someone poke their nose in every now and again, I'm still here for it. And we've managed to ramble on for an hour about that. So it's not all down in the dump.
No, absolutely. That's a good note to end on. Be optimistic, race by race. I like that one. It is. I think you're right on the Formula 1 thing. I feel like that looking back through the years. But thank you very much, Stuart, and I will probably talk to you very, very shortly. Thank you just messing about there with things. Thank you very much, Stuart, once again. If you had any problems, by the way, with the chat on screen, OBS, I was trying some streaming settings earlier in the week, and I thought I got them right, and I clearly haven't, because it keeps lagging with the chat, so apologies for that. I'll try and get it sorted for the next stream, which will be next Sunday. I might see if I can go live at some point before that. There will be no watch-alongs next weekend again. There'll be more on that soon. And also, keep this short. If you are a fan of Formula E, which I know not everybody is, but if you are a fan of Formula E, keep an eye out on the FE Word Twitter at FE_word for some news later this week. And I'm going to leave it there. But that is it for this stream. Thank you very much to everyone for coming along. I will be back tomorrow, 4, 5, 6 o'clock UK time, with the debrief. Probably a bit shorter than the Canadian Grand Prix one, but the debrief will be out tomorrow at the usual time-ish. And then, of course, it's all the build-up to the Austrian Grand Prix. Preview on Thursday, possibly something on the Friday, qualifying report Saturday, and then, of course, we'll be live again for the race reaction on Sunday. I do love a good back-to-back Grand Prix. In the meantime, though, you can follow me over on social media. The links, as always, to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course the Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.